I want to go back to Budapest, to Peter Balazs. What we're discussing about is how to bring the Eastern neighbors into the fold. That's the name of our discussion. The 100 million people, as you said, that are drifting in some respects. You referred to Hungary's upcoming EU presidency, followed by the Polish EU presidency. In some respects, you can say this offers a real opportunity for Central European leadership to provide coherence to policy, to the voice, on how to handle issues looking east, how to build the Eastern Partnership. Yet Iulian was very diplomatic when he referred to the U.S. moving out on Russia reset. I think you probably were alluding to Chancellor Merkel's outreach on a bilateral basis to Russia for a security forum. The latest announcements out of Paris and President Sarkozy on issues that he wants to take up with Russia. You've served as foreign minister of Hungary. If you were back in that position, taking leadership of the Hungarian EU presidency, how do you manage this? How do you create a coherent voice for Europe with Washington towards the east? How do you manage this outreach among the big players to Russia? And how does Russia fit into the calculation as we think about trying to roll, as we think about this discussion of bringing the Eastern neighbors into the fold?
Well, I think that the Eastern Partnership is a good framework. I was there as a minister at the start of that action, and I'm looking forward to real content to it. We have to fill with concrete projects. It is not enough to praise the project, but to give some content. Now, jumping directly into EU membership is not a realistic plan, either from the EU side, because the EU should be prepared for further enlargements on the one hand, neither from the potential candidates, because they don't necessarily want to join the EU immediately, or NATO. Now, what could we do? I would say three things. I mentioned one. Border management. Now we've got common border lines. We have to deal with them. I don't repeat myself. I would like to add two others. The first are networks. When we try to plan the future of trans-European railways or trans-European telecommunication networks, trans-European energy networks, environment protection networks, then we need each other from both sides. And even if we add those countries that we call today the Eastern partners, which is a very egoistic concept seen from Brussels, because for them we are the Western partners. So why are they the Eastern partners? Okay, but by any name, we should include all those countries into our projects, and not forgetting Russia, because railways are not ending at the Ukrainian-Russian border or other borders, but we have to extend our all-European networks. Networks is one point. The other point is an emerging new dimension. In the European Union, we call it macro regions. The first macro region was shaped in the Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea is connecting the Baltic Sea countries with Russia. It's a very useful exercise. Now we are working on the Danube strategy. We have launched it, and hopefully under the coming Hungarian EU presidency, it will be accepted by the heads of government. Connecting all the Danube countries, leading from Germany down to the Black Sea, including Ukraine, Moldavia, and all the countries. Then there is an emerging interest for the Black Sea. And we could go on. I would like to add two continental dimensions, just mentioning the names. Kaliningrad, which would be a very close connection between Russia and the EU, and the Transcarpathian part of Ukraine, which is surrounded by 4 EU members: Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland. So there are plenty of opportunities we could use and put to the benefit of all the participants from both sides, not excluding US interest in the region.
Thanks, Peter. You've outlined some very practical aspects here, some projects, but is this sufficient? And do these projects help to advance a policy in the absence of clarity and vision? So I want to turn to Hryhoriy to ask, how does this sound to Ukrainian ears? border management, project-based work that includes Russia, these regional interconnections, the opportunities, Kaliningrad, Transcarpathia. Does this translate into a policy that helps transform Ukraine, to your mind?
Just before coming to this plenary, I went to the session about values and democracy. And it was Alex Smolar who, while answering the question why the democracies in the Central Europe, including Poland, are so stable, while further to the east they're so fragile, he answered, or at least partially answered to this, saying that because of the external regime of the EU enlargement paradigm and the whole conditionality applied, and there were some moments, even in the most recent history of Poland, when unless this strategic course, direction, sense of direction, and the gravity of the EU membership was not there, so who knows how these things would... So the first thing to start with, for Ukraine, it would be much more difficult, and we have to recognize this fact, to progress further, to come closer to the European Union. Now, with the situation of when the EU membership perspective is not on the table, so the question is to what extent the European Eastern Partnership, which is a byproduct of the development of the European neighborhood policy, would suffice. Again, an important question to ask. The basic organizing idea behind, just to remind you, European neighborhood policy was, to quote Romano Prodi, at that time, creating a ring of friends, well-governed, prosperous, democratic states on the border with the European Union. There is a more, the other way, I think it was him who used also everything but institutions. So, which, there is, and then I think it's about definitely more than 5 years last, but there is almost nothing. To what extent the Eastern Partnership, which is a good thing, and I would commend to especially Poland and Sweden for pushing this forward to give it substance. I do agree with my Hungarian colleague that there is a substance there if used properly, if there is not just political will, but resources and commitment to use this to come closer to the European Union. And there are three, of course, programs or instruments that are all important. One has been mentioned, which is integrated border management, which is important, especially taking into account the ambition for the future visa-free travel, but also taking into account the frozen conflicts in the region. The second one, which lies very close to my heart, because we established, and it's so difficult, a mechanism of horizontal coordination of the European integration policy. It's comprehensive institution building, which is part on the table. And the third one, which I think is heavily underestimated now in Ukraine, and especially with, unfortunately, with the new government who cares only about cheap gas as a priority number one, that's energy efficiency. Because this is, you cannot move, you cannot modernize your economy from inside if you would still rely on the cheap gas and in this increased dependency on, among others, Russian Federation, rather than diversify this dependency. These three are clearly something to explore. Now, there is also, it was a potential, and somebody this morning mentioned Visegrad 4 in the role in getting these countries' success stories. The question is to what extent this regional, sub-regional potential of cooperation exists. Much more difficult, because those countries in the region, if you take Moldova, for example, Belarus, Ukraine, and the South Caucasian countries, they all have a quite different ambitions as far as foreign security policy is concerned. It's not the case for the Visegrad 4, that were all willing, they knew the point of destination, the sense of direction was right. It's not the case here. How you clearly develop this regional cooperation when you have WTO members countries and non-WTO members countries? how you have this regional potential to be a fruitful one and value-added when one country aspires for the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, while others are moving to the customs union with the Russian Federation and Kazakhstan. So it's much more diversified region, and I think it's still rather counterproductive to try to pack them in what is called post-Soviet space rather than to judge them on their own merits. That's one, by the way, of the, again, principles behind the neighborhood policy, but it's not transformed itself significantly enough to the instruments that would be of use for both countries. And again, to repeat it, what happens, because it's happening now, when after advances and some things that seems to be irreversible after the Orange Revolution, now there is a growing and growing concerns that domestically democracy is eroding, degenerating into something new. Just to give you one example, this could be a simple, because this is the gathering of intellectuals. The new Ministry of Education issued the instructions to delete any mentioning about the Orange Revolution from the school textbooks. So this speaks volumes about the sense of direction. So what instruments can be used both from inside, and that's the responsibility of the Ukrainian people, civil society, political class to respond, but also how serious EU is, the United States, others who are in the region, to consider this as a potential risk factor and to deal with rather earlier than later.